Hey, this is Roy. Welcome to the Executive Beechcraft Historical Channel and Hysterical Channel. These are some artifacts from the days. This Somebody carved this. It's supposed to be a beach jet, I think. EB. It may be backwards with your, through the YouTube. I don't know how that works, but it looks backwards to me right now. And then back here is a picture of the old airport um, when it was. When it was the main airport, when it was TWA, and then the Executive Beechcraft, of course, took over the old TWA building. Funny story, well, not funny, but interesting story about that was when my dad came to Kansas City in '69, he actually came down and applied at the downtown airport at the Executive Beechcraft building, which, of course, was TWA. And he got his job there, and then he worked there for a little while. Then he went from there up to KCI to go up and work at the big airport. So pretty cool. He and I worked in the same building, albeit several years apart. But guys, I'm going to need you to get with me on on Facebook Messenger, or if you're on the YouTube side, you can make suggestions in the comments below there about stories, because there's so many, and some can't be told for safety legal reasons, probably. There's a joke going around that there's a few pilots in the country currently flying around that when they see me or other people coming, they get a little bit nervous because the stories, we know stories, and it's pretty fun though. But yeah, Dale Carpenter, my buddy, was telling me. And Darren Piper was telling me about a story down at the bulk plant one day. This is one that happened when I was down there checking in a fuel load of jet fuel at 7A and B down there. 7A and B didn't have a pump on the actual 7A and B tanks. The semi truck had to use its own pump. The rest of the tanks had pumps that could pull the fuel off the plane, off of the truck. But in this case, that 7A and B didn't have that capability. So anyway, the young kid, he was new, real green, Grondike driver. He drove the fuel truck, the big tankers. And he came in to deliver a fuel load. And I was down there checking it in as we did. And the large fuel hoses that go on there, and for non-aviation people out there, there's a really large fuel hose that goes on there, and it's probably, I think they were 3.5 inches or maybe 4 inches. And they'll pump a lot of fuel. I mean, you can put out several thousand gallons in short order. And they have this little wings that you lock down on when you stick the nozzle in. You lock these two wings down, and it kind of locks it in place. And this guy put the hose on the side of his truck, and then plugged the other hose into our receptacle to go into the tanks. And man, I was standing about 15, 20 feet away, luckily. He turned on that pump for the truck, and he was in the truck doing it, doing the PTO and the actuation there. And I'm telling you, that hose popped off of there. And dude and dudettes, the fuel shot out of that thing all the way over to the tank. Almost all the way to the tank. And I mean, it was a straight stream of 4-inch round jet fuel shooting out of that thing. I mean, hardcore. This kid, he was real new. It was wintertime. I have to say that because there's a story that goes along with this. But this kid grabbed that hose, jumped in the middle of that Niagara Falls of jet fuel, and tried to stick this hose back on the hole. And I mean, he jumped in the middle. I'm yelling, no, and I'm yelling, no, don't do, get out of there. And the fuel's just spraying up like you can imagine. Just imagine trying to stem this flow. And he thinks he can stick the hose back on. He's grabbing it, and I'm yelling, where's your emergency shutoff? Where's your emergency? I'm running around the truck. And finally, I ran to the back, and I saw the emergency shutoff, and I hit the switch, and boom, the truck starts spooling down, and the fuel starts flowing out, and now it's just kind of trickling. And then the kid, he's got the hose, and he looks over at me, and he's blinking because jet fuel, as you know, it burns your eyes. He throws the hose down, and he steps back, and I mean, he is soaked, completely soaked like I've never seen anybody soaked in jet fuel, and I've seen jet fuel spills. This kid was like, it's like he took a shower. It's an amazing amount of jet fuel. He couldn't even see. He staggers over towards me, and he had his coveralls on. And I said, man, get those coveralls off right now. And he starts tearing his coveralls off, and he's got jeans and a shirt on. I said, get those off too, because it's going to burn. It's going to burn your skin. And simultaneously, I'd called the line office, and I said, somebody come down here quick. And this guy, there's a big fuel spill down here. Get somebody down here. So one of the trucks was fairly close, actually, one of the 4x4s. And I had that kid stripped down to his underwear. And he jumped in the truck, and I said, get him down to the building, get him in the shower. And they flew him down there to the main hangar 1 and took him back in the shower and let him stand in there for a while and get himself cleaned out, because that jet fuel is pretty ugly. It's not too pleasant on your skin after a little bit. And all his clothes were just laying there. And actually, I remember what I did. He got all his clothes off. He had his underwear on. I had my coveralls on. I took mine off and put them on him so he wouldn't be cold. And plus, he's standing there in his underwear. And I got my coveralls on him, and then they took him down there and got him all cleaned up. And it was a big deal. They had to come down, and their company came down and looked at it, and blah blah blah. And they came up with a new way to lock the ears on so they wouldn't. So it wouldn't spill. It was like a band that went around there and clamped on those wheels, on those ears. But yeah, that was a crazy story from the bulk plant. Somebody else was talking about Byung Che. I'll say his name. He's probably in Korea now. Byung Che. I don't know all the particulars, but I and some of you guys might be able to help me out on it. But I think he ran over. Either he took off with the hose still hooked on, and it tore the hose off the truck, or he ran over something and fuel was just gushing out of the truck. And he just stood down there at the bulk plant while 2,000 gallons of fuel was running out of the truck. He didn't think to turn the emergency shut off. Somebody drove all the way down there from the hangar and went ahead and shut the emergency shut off, but it was already a couple thousand gallons of fuel out of there. And it flowed into the drainage system. They had stormwater drainage down at that bulk plant, and they had a valve that you could shut. It was a big screw valve. You could shut that valve, and you could trap any spilled fuel in the storm drainage system, so it wouldn't go out to the river. Well, great. We had 2,000 gallons trapped in there. That's cool. But a storm came. A big rainstorm came. And a thunderstorm came, and it filled that thing up with water, too. So not only did they have to suck out the 2,000 gallons of jet fuel, they also had to suck out all this rainwater because it was, had jet fuel in it. So that was a big expensive deal for Executive Beechcraft right there. That was a big deal. That was a real big deal. Real quick, another story was I was working nights at the time, and we were down there, and there was a big storm coming. This was before you had the weather radar and stuff. You had to just rely on what the tower was telling you, and there was a little radar thing back in the flight planning room that had lightning strikes on it, and if you could see those coming, it would kind of give you more of an idea of what kind of storm was coming if there was a lot of lightning in it. And we got the word there was going to be a lot of wind, and Life Flight helicopter people said, hey, we need to get our helicopter in. And I said, well, fly it over to Hangar 9. There's no other place to put it. We've put everything else in already. So they flew it over to the north side of Hangar 9 and landed it right there. And the storm came. And they're yelling to get us in. I said, we're not going out in this. This is too much. You guys are just going to have to ride it out right here. And I'll tell you what, guys. That wind came across that airport. And that Life Flight helicopter, it still skids. It's a big helicopter. It's not on wheels for non-aviation people. It's actually on skids. It just lands right on the ground. It was sliding across the pavement in the wind. And the blades were swinging in 15-foot arcs up and down, nearly touching the ground on the downside of the arcs. I mean, it was an amazing sight. I was sitting in a 4x4 with Mark Crazy Bear. That's right. And we were watching that, and I thought, holy cow. And, we were like, it was just a miracle. And the thing was moving around and jostling around. It was a miracle it didn't blow over and break and just break apart. It was crazy. It was crazy. A big piece of the hanger flew off. A couple big pieces of the hanger flew off that day. Big, like 20-foot long, 4-foot wide pieces of corrugated panel flew off, and they landed on the ground. They were blowing around, and oh my gosh, I remember this. I told Mark, I said, we need to get those big pieces out of there. They may fly around and hit a plane or something. You know, the wind had ceased to a point where you could, you know, it was still blowing pretty hard, but I mean, we were to a point where you could stand up in it. And I ran over and grabbed the end of my piece of sheet metal because I'm smart. Well, sort of. I grabbed the end of mine so that the wind would just blow and I could pull it backwards, you know, and I got it back and I shoved it in the hangar. And I looked out there and Mark Crazy Bear ran around to a big piece, got on the back side of it, and tried to pick it up in the middle with the wind facing him. Man, as soon as he brought the lip of that corrugated steel thing up, it was like a wing. Off he went. I mean, flying backwards, head over heels, sheet metal flying, going clean across the airport by that time. But I told him, I yelled, no, but it was too late. He'd already picked it up. So yeah, anyway, that storm was bad. It tore up a bunch of airplanes at the airport. Mr. Meisinger called me, and he said, I know there's a big storm. He says, did we have any airplanes damaged? I said, no, I don't think we did. We got everything in. We got all the planes tied down. I don't think we did. But Aero Services or Aero Center, they were operated up on the northeast end of the airport. They lost 8 or 10 airplanes. Airplanes just broke loose and just, you know, bounced into each other, just mutilated airplanes. They would break their chains, and actually they had ropes up there. That's why they broke. But they had ropes. They would break a rope on one wing, and then the plane would just go bam, 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 bam. You know, the wing would come up and hit, and boom, and go back down. So yeah, Mr. Meisinger said, we have any damaged airplanes? I said, no. And I was really happy about that. But then later on that night, I was doing a tie down, just checking tie down. And I went over to the west side of the airport, and I remembered that there was a Cessna 150 in the tie down area that wasn't there anymore. And I said, man, I think there was a Cessna right there. And I went over and looked, and the chains were broke. But I looked around, I didn't see the airplane anywhere. This is on the west side of the airport. I didn't see the plane. So I went looking for it. And I'm looking all over the place, and I went to the east side of the airport, and over there by Aero Services at the north end of the airport, I found it. It had blown end over end, sideways over sideways. The wings were wrapping around like they were hugging it. It was mutilated. I had to call Mr. Meisinger back and say, well, I think we lost one plane. As it turned out, though, the plane that did break loose clipped the tail of a Cherokee and barely damaged the top of a tail of a Cherokee as it departed. And I mean, it was tied down. It broke the chains off. And you know, you guys that were down there, you realize how big those chains were. But you know, I could go for a long, long time on these stories. We had a good time. I remember Dale was telling me that he reminded me of one thing we used to do on Hangar 1. We would bring the door up about 5 feet, and then you would grab a hold of a piece of metal on the bottom of the door, and then someone would raise the door while you were hanging on the door. And I mean, when it gets up there, it's 30 feet off the ground, 40 feet off the ground. And they would raise it up, and then they would bring it back down again. And I'm telling you, boy, it doesn't come down quick enough when you've been hanging up there, because as you guys realize, if you guys remember those doors, they weren't that fast. And I'm telling you, you're pretty nervous when you're just hanging from that thing. We did some things down there that only because of God's grace and probably some skill, nobody died. We did some crazy, really, really crazy fun things. Dale actually climbed up on the inside of Hangar 9. If you guys remember Hangar 9, that giant, used to be Continental Airlines hangar when the airline was in there. But he climbed up the beams and got all the way up on the top of that thing and walked across. Up on the top of Hangar 9, inside. Now, I've been on top of Hangar 9 outside. Several people have done that. But so, you know, if you guys have more stories, I've got a lot that, I got some that would be dangerous to share. if I can modify them a little bit, maybe. But so those are some of the executive Beechcraft stories. It was a great place to be, guys. For those of you who weren't involved with it, and those of you that were, you know, it was a special, one of a kind time. There are people down there in those hangars and in that line office that have no idea of the history of it. It's like the people in Egypt. They have no idea who built the pyramids. You know, I know that seems a little not much of a comparison, but in a way it is, because you've got guys in that line office that don't know Jerry Mott. They don't know Dan Jones. They don't know Nathan Kretzinger, John Arvin, Jerry Mott. I said his name already. Jay New, Joe Baker, you know, Byung Che, Oak Moon. They don't know those people there. They don't know the history of it, how powerful the history is. When the Meissingers sold it, the soul of that place went too. And I think there's one person there still, Mike Lavenberg, working the night shift. But yeah, I mean, they go in that hangar, they walk around that hangar, they have no idea. They go back in the locker room, they have no idea. They go to the front desk, they go out on the ramp, they walk around out there, they get on those tugs. They have no idea of the history. And there, I mean, there's a lot of people that came through that line office that became pilots, airline pilots, corporate pilots, military pilots. It was a factory of very, very, very good pilots, good men, good people. There was an amazing group of people down there, men and women, and the job was special, and I'm proud and happy to have been able to be involved with it. So I'm going to think of some more. There's a whole lot more. If you guys have any you want me to tell, remind me. Thank you guys. Have a good night. You saw my EB stuff. You right here in that picture. I got some other stuff. I'll show it later. Have a good evening, guys. Bye-bye.